Okay, our next speaker is Jannette Barth. Jannette is president of J.M. Barth & Associates Incorporated, an economic research and consulting firm. As a landowner in Delaware County, New York, in the Marcellus Shale region, Dr. Barth became interested in the economic and environmental impacts of gas drilling using hydraulic fracturing techniques. After reviewing the existing studies of economic impacts of gas drilling in New York, including the treatment in the draft supplemental generic environmental impact statement produced by the DEC, Dr. Barth authored a summary report, Unanswered Questions about the Economic Impact of Gas Drilling in the Marcellus Shale. Don't jump to conclusions. She is a supporter of sustainable economic development and volunteers much of her time applying her knowledge and experience to environmental and economic development issues. Please welcome Dr. Jannette Barth.
Can everybody hear me? I first want to thank Jeff and Jody for organizing this wonderful event. Thank you. I first started hearing about gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale about 3 years ago. I heard concerns about the environment, and I heard public health concerns. And then I also heard grandiose claims about the great economic benefit that would come to upstate New York if we had hydraulic fracturing up here. Well, as I'm an economist, and I have been for a very long time, I decided to read the economic impact studies that have been done, and that's how I got involved in the issue. When I read the economic impact studies that keep getting quoted in the press, I was shocked to see how incomplete and biased that they are. I was appalled when I then realized that our legislators are making financial projections based on these flawed studies. And frankly, I'm continually discouraged when I hear people who are truly concerned about the environmental and health impacts say things like, "We are concerned about the environment and health risks, even though hydrofracking will be great for our economy." These people have not done their homework. This will not be good for our economy, and our decision makers, from Governor Cuomo all the way down to our local town supervisors, are not paying attention to the unbiased and respected economic data and research. The gas industry claims that hydrofracking is safe. They claim that shale gas is a clean fuel. They claim that shale gas will reduce our dependency on foreign fuel. And they claim that hydrofracking will bring great economic prosperity to upstate New York. The gas industry is misleading the public and our politicians on every one of these issues. Every new piece of research that comes out on these subjects brings more bad news. But my focus is on economic impact, as I'm an economist. I know that upstate New York, and specifically the area on top of the Marcellus Shale, has been having a very difficult time economically. We've had a depressed economy for some time. And I'm the first to want to support our struggling farmers and anyone else who's struggling. But gas drilling just may not be the answer. Those New Yorkers who support gas drilling desperately want to believe that gas drilling will be a panacea to all of the economic woes of upstate New York. In reality, the region may be even worse off in the long run if we allow gas drilling. Is the potential economic gain worth the risks? So as I said, I've reviewed the frequently quoted economic impact studies, and I'm going to explain to you why these studies' results are exaggerated. But first, a warning. We've all heard numbers like 100, 200, even maybe 400 jobs created per well. Please remember that these numbers are very exaggerated. Gas workers move from well to well, so those jobs are not being created with each well. These jobs are not measured in person years, and many of these jobs are part-time. And also, many of these workers are imported from other states on a part-time or transient basis. So whenever you hear such numbers quoted, please be sure to look at the numbers carefully, question where they came from, seek out the source of bias. Before you start quoting them or believing them, please check them out carefully. Also, note that when you hear great claims of job creation in the oil and gas industry, Remember that the oil and gas industry is 10 times more capital intensive than the average American industry. So perhaps it would be better for our regional economy to encourage an industry that is labor intensive, not capital intensive. The studies that claim a positive economic impact tend to be either biased, dated, seriously flawed, or simply inapplicable to our region. Studies not funded by the gas companies have reached vastly different conclusions than those funded by the gas companies. The studies that I reviewed are from 5 regions. In New York, I looked at the Draft Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Study, the SGEIS. And I also looked at the Broome County study. In Pennsylvania, I looked at 2 studies out of Penn State, both funded by the gas industry, and a third one funded by the American Petroleum Institute. Also in the Marcellus Shale, there was a study of West Virginia, and in the Fayetteville Shale in Arkansas, there were 2 studies out of the local business school, both funded by Southwestern Energy. In Texas, I looked at a study called the Perryman Study. And finally, I looked at a study of the western states by a firm called Headwater Economics. And there are a few academic studies that I'm going to mention too toward the end. The SGEIS was released by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, in 2009. The economic analysis included in the SGEIS is from 1988. Yes, 1988. It's 23 years old. No responsible decision maker should rely on any economic analysis that is 23 years old. A lot of things change in the economy in 23 years. The SGEIS ignores the possible declines in other industries that may result from both pollution and a shift to an industrial landscape. These industries include agriculture, tourism, organic farming, winemaking, hunting, fishing, river recreation, to name a few. A thorough evaluation would include impact analysis of potential declines in all of these industries. The SGEIS also ignores other significant costs. For example, it recommends that 150 new tasks be assigned to the DEC, but the cost of staffing these additional tasks are not reflected in the analysis. The SGEIS itself references other flawed studies, one of which is the Broome County study. The Broome County study was commissioned by the Broome County Legislature, and the county there seems to be relying on this study to estimate its potential county revenue into the future. The Broome County study ignores decline in other industries, again, tourism, agriculture, et cetera. A major food cooperative in New York City that purchases millions of dollars of New York State-produced agricultural products, especially in our new industry, organic farming. They've stated, our members will not want the fruit and veggies that come from farms in an industrialized area, and they are also concerned about whether the cows they buy are drinking contaminated water and breathing the air fouled by numerous enormous trucks required in the hydrofracking process and also by the process itself. The Broome County study ignores the fact that there will be damage to infrastructure, especially roads and bridges. It's recently come to my attention that in the Fayetteville Shale region in Arkansas, where I note there is a severance tax, we don't have a severance tax in New York, the Arkansas Highway Department said that the gas industry has caused $455 million worth of damage to state highways. Note that this doesn't include county or city roads, so the full road damage would be much more. Arkansas added a small amount to the severance tax specifically to help pay for this road damage, and in 1.5 years, they only collected $36 million. So the taxpayers of Arkansas will have to make up the difference, which is more than $400 million. Back to the Broome County study. The costs of drinking water contamination and land, stream, and air pollution are ignored in the Broome County study. The cost of mitigation is ignored, and so is the cost in terms of health. Various contaminants in the fracking fluid and the flowback fluids are endocrine disruptors and carcinogens. The economic costs of treating birth defects and serious diseases are not reflected in this study or in any of the economic impact studies. The study ignores declines in property values. Supporters of gas drilling say that property values will increase. Here is a major unanswered question. Rental rates will probably increase due to the influx of transient workers. Hotel occupancy rates may increase, and we've actually seen this happen in Pennsylvania. The value of large tracts of land may increase, but single-family homes and smaller lots will probably decline in value. Reports indicate that some banks are not giving mortgages for properties with a gas lease or even for properties nearby a gas lease. And how do you sell a house if your buyer can't get a mortgage or if it has contaminated drinking water? Also, some insurance companies are refusing to issue policies on homes with gas wells. It was reported that the Wise County Central Real Estate Appraisal District, Wise County is in Texas in the Barnett Shale. That appraisal district decreases values of homes by 75% when a gas well sits on the land. Also, the industry-funded studies that I reviewed from Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and West Virginia suffer from the same deficiencies that I've just discussed in the Broome County study. They ignore significant costs, such as infrastructure costs, including maintenance and repair of roads. They ignore the costs of pollution and drinking water contamination. They ignore the costs associated with human illness. And they ignore declines in property values. And of course, they all ignore the likely decline in other industries. All of these studies take a short-term view. They don't address what happens when the gas is gone and we may be left with contaminated drinking water, pollution, an industrial landscape, a population with failing health, and vanished employment opportunities. They use data that may be highly biased, as the data are provided by the gas industry. And they use a methodology that exaggerates economic impact. Let's look at the economic reality in New York. While I'm the first one to admit there are many factors that may distinguish one county from another, I decided to look at some of the measures of economic health in gas-intensive New York State counties. I looked at actual data for the top 10 gas-producing counties in New York State. Of course, these are conventional vertical wells. I looked at the period from 2006 to 2008, and I compared the top 10 gas-producing counties to 5 neighboring counties. Those neighboring counties do not have gas wells. The gas-intensive counties are not better off than the non-gas drilling counties. The gas-intensive counties are not better off when you look at things like the number of families below poverty level, the median household income, or unemployment rates. And by the way, I'm not the only economist saying this. Dr. Susan Christopherson at Cornell is doing a study as well on economic impact. Now, she did the same comparison after I did. She did it not only for New York State counties, but also for Pennsylvania counties, and she reached the exact same conclusion. Also, very recently, the West Virginia Center on Budget and Policy reached the exact same conclusions for West Virginia counties. What about the economic reality in Pennsylvania, where they are already fracking fast and furiously? It appears that the industry has been exaggerating its estimates of gas production expected from shale. Arthur Berman, a petroleum geologist and financial consultant to the energy sector, and also some other analysts, as reported in the Financial Times, have shown that the decline curves for gas extraction in the Barnett Shale and Fayetteville Shale are much steeper than industry claims. This basically means that the vast majority of the gas is produced in the very first year or first 2 years of production. So the years of production per well are fewer in reality than what is assumed in the economic impact studies, where the industry is providing the assumptions. Analysts have also claimed that reserves themselves may be overestimated by a substantial factor, possibly as high as 300%. And gas companies have borrowed a huge amount of money based on reserves that they cannot pull out of the ground at a commercially viable cost. Some analysts have gone so far as to liken this to the mortgage-backed securities bubble. So if assumptions of the levels of gas production and the number of years of production are overly exaggerated, and these are put into an economic model, then it's pretty obvious that the projections coming out of that model, such as employment levels, income levels, and tax revenue, will also be overly exaggerated. This is true of the studies coming out of Penn State, as they have used these exaggerated gas production numbers provided by the industry. An additional reality in Pennsylvania is that many gas industry workers from Pennsylvania are from out of state. Some reports say as many as 70%, and some reports say 30%. I believe that that 30% figure is based on a very recent survey of drilling companies active in Pennsylvania. You don't think they'd be likely to stretch the truth, would you? Industry claims that they are committed to hiring local workers. An Oklahoma paper recently reported that many gas companies are using dormitory-style housing because most workers are from outside of the area, spending 2 weeks on the job and 2 weeks off. And we know that quite recently, Chesapeake Energy built exactly such housing in the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania. So I ask, why build such housing if the industry is truly committed to hiring local residents? And please be aware that if the jobs are going to out-of-state workers, those workers are likely sending their wages home to their families in their home states, where most of the wages get spent, improving those economies and increasing those tax revenues. It's interesting that the Marcellus Shale Coalition, a lobbying organization for the gas industry, kept quoting the Penn State study and claimed that 88,000 new jobs were created in Pennsylvania in 2010 due to the Marcellus Shale drilling. Publicly available Pennsylvania data for the same time period clearly showed that total job creation in the entire state was only 65,600. And half of those jobs were in education and health and in leisure and hospitality. The grandiose job creation claimed by the industry is not at all consistent with the data available from unbiased, publicly available sources. And very recently, gas industry groups such as the Marcellus Shale Coalition and Energy in Depth have continued to mislead the public by misinterpreting a report from the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. The Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry assigned 6 industries to the core Marcellus Shale activity, and an additional 21 industries to ancillary Marcellus Shale activity. The report states that there were 48,000 new hires in these industries from the fourth quarter of 2009 through the first quarter of 2011. This is less than the 88,000 formerly claimed by industry spokespeople. That was claimed for 2010 alone. But even the 48,000 is a highly inaccurate statement. Anyone familiar with the new hires data knows that these data do not accurately reflect employment growth. The gas industry representatives failed to point out that users of new hires data should not draw conclusions about job growth trends based on new hires data. New hires and the actual change in employment may be vastly different when a large number of jobs are added by some employers during the same period that a large number of jobs are eliminated by other employers. Also, a new hire is not necessarily a new job. The latest official employment numbers out of Pennsylvania, reported just last week, and is in a Keystone Research Center report, shows that taken together, the Marcellus core and ancillary industries created only 5,669 jobs between the fourth quarter of 2007 and the fourth quarter of 2010. And you should all make note of an important statement in the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry report. It says that not all establishments in these industries, these ancillary industries, are necessarily involved in the Marcellus Shale. So even the 5,600 Marcellus-related jobs created between 2007 and 2010 may be overstated. So again, the industry continues to mislead the public in order to paint a rosy picture so they can reap high profits. I visited Bradford County recently. In Pennsylvania, Bradford County has a lot of drilling going on. And I spoke with various people, and I toured the area to see some gas drilling rigs. I was told by a county commissioner that Bradford County was advised by a team of academic sociologists that 80% of communities with gas drilling are worse off in the long run. Bradford County wants to be one of the 20%. What county wouldn't want to be one of the 20%? But it takes very careful planning and proper regulation and policy making, and it would require significantly slowing down the pace and extent of drilling in Pennsylvania. I was told that people in Bradford County feel like their community is being treated as a throwaway community. Yes, they used that term, throwaway community, for the benefit of the oil and gas industry. I don't want that for our communities in New York State. We rarely hear about pipeline issues, but this is a whole other can of worms. If hydrofracking starts here, we will be seeing a vast network of pipelines, gas company gathering lines and transmission lines. You can see the spider webs of all of these lines when you travel in Bradford County. And it's been pointed out in both Texas and in Bradford County that the potential future development is often destroyed in these communities because building cannot take place on top of or too close to pipelines. The large, winding spider web of gas lines, from drilling pads to transmission lines, may very well prevent our communities from building in the future. And one fact that many don't realize is that small towns are much more exposed to the economic risk, as they have small budgets, small taxpayer bases, and very little diversity. We must also be aware that communities with actual wells are not the only communities that will be impacted in a negative way. Nearby communities without gas wells will have related industrial development, such as water treatment facilities, staging areas, man camps, pipelines. And they will also have costs associated with heavy industrial development and a long-term bust, even if no drilling is going on in that community. I'm going to say a few words about Texas, because many supporters of natural gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale point to the success of the Barnett Shale. There's only one economic impact study that I know of in the Barnett Shale. It's referred to as the Perryman study because it was done by the Perryman Group. Now, I've been developing economic models for a very long time, and I would never, ever submit a report without clearly stating my data sources, describing my model structure, and even showing tests of model accuracy. The Perryman study fails on all three counts. It doesn't make clear where the data come from, and it actually claims that its econometric model is proprietary, a lot like those hydrofracking fluids. So I simply cannot trust this study until more information is available. But even if Texas has experienced a significant positive economic impact, it doesn't mean that New York State will. Comparing the economic impact of gas drilling in the Barnett Shale to gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale is like comparing apples to oranges. The labor force in Texas has the requisite skill set due to its long history of oil and gas drilling there. Rural counties in upstate New York have to import much of this labor. We saw that Pennsylvania has imported as much as 70% of its gas drilling labor force. The imported labor is often temporary in transit, sending their money back home, possibly to Texas. Texas has a huge support industry network for the oil and gas industry. It has all the requisite machinery and equipment, much of which is distributed, contracted for, repaired, and serviced in Texas. And New York State doesn't have gas company headquarters. Guess what? They tend to be headquartered in Oklahoma or Texas. The Barnett Shale is in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, a dynamic urban region with all the affected industries ensconced right there. This is very different from rural New York. Also, Texas has a warm climate, so as landowners become rich, they're likely to stay there. We have no idea if our newly found wealthy landowners in New York will stay here or if they'll move to a warmer climate and take all their money with them to spend there, possibly in Texas. And if that happens, note, you not only have a reduction in spending here, but you could have a reduction in property values as well. So Texas may, in fact, derive a greater economic benefit from gas drilling in New York than will New York. And by the way, when I said this to an audience, I don't usually have Texans in my audience, but when I said this to an audience with a bunch of Texans, they stood up and they said, wait a minute, you're making it sound like Texas is really doing great from this gas drilling. We are not, they said. A nonprofit firm out west, Headwaters Economics, did an informative study that was not funded by the gas companies. It analyzed 23 counties, all out west, to compare the economic health of counties that focused on fossil fuel extraction as a strategy for economic development. It compared those counties to neighboring counties that did not focus on fossil fuel extraction. It concluded that the counties that were not focused on fossil fuel extraction experienced higher growth rates, more diverse economies, better educated populations, a smaller gap between high and low income households, and more retirement and investment income. Another study, an academic study published in 2002, reviewed 301 quantitative analyses in order to determine the economic implications of mining for non-metropolitan regions. It concluded that unemployment and poverty worsened in mining counties in non-metropolitan regions. It found that the highest levels of long-term poverty are in places where there was once a thriving extractive industry. A peer-reviewed article in the academic journal Ecological Economics, very recently, by Bucknell professor Thomas Kinnaman, also concludes that the industry-funded economic impact studies of shale gas extraction are overstating the economic impacts, and it is very important to have accurate estimates for the functioning of the state economy. Again, it appears that Broome County is depending on the overstated results in the Broome County study to make projections for its county budget, and this can be very problematic. Professor Power from the University of Montana concludes that few jobs are created by the gas industry. He describes the two phases of gas development. The first is drilling and development of the wells, and in this phase, he's concluded that only one full-time job is created per well. The second phase is operation and maintenance. And in this phase, Professor Power concluded that between 1/10 and 1/2 of a full-time job is created per well. It's not a lot of job creation. Remember, it's a very capital-intensive industry. Another study that I referred to earlier is being done again by Dr. Susan Christofferson at Cornell. Her research is not funded by the gas industry either. It's funded by the Heinz Foundation and the Park Foundation. She says that the gas industry is a speculative, high-risk, short-term industry, and that the shale play is likely to create a short-term boom followed by a long-term bust. And note that not only economists and environmental activists are saying this about the economic impact. Even investment analysts say that the oil and gas business has a record of booms and busts. Nobody disagrees that there will be short-term jobs created, including jobs on drilling sites and ancillary jobs such as truck drivers, welders, road workers, hotel and restaurant workers. The questions are, how many are long-term, full-time jobs? How many are good jobs? How many of these jobs will be filled by local residents? And how long will these jobs last? In reality, it appears that the only parties likely to benefit in the long run are the gas companies and a very few lucky landowners. Here are some of my conclusions of economic impact. The economic impact studies that conclude a positive impact ignore important and significant costs. The economic impact studies that show positive benefits have been funded primarily by the gas industry. The methodology used is often inappropriate for a thorough evaluation of the industry in this region. The economic impact may not be worth the risk of the potentially severe and in some cases irreversible consequences in the form of health, environmental, and infrastructure degradation. Gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale is likely to result in a short-term boom followed by a long-term bust. Beware, gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale may well result in a net negative economic impact for New York. We're lucky in New York that we have an opportunity to wait and watch what happens in our neighboring state of Pennsylvania. We can watch them over the longer term before we take any risks. The gas will not go anywhere while we wait, watch, do the thorough research, and figure out how to extract the resource safely and in a way that would benefit and protect everybody in the region. We must insist that our decision makers make the right choices to protect our people, our land, and our water. Here's my email address. Please feel free to contact me. Thank you.